The suspicion started with a receipt, a crumpled piece of paper I found in the pocket of my husband's jeans while doing laundry on a Tuesday afternoon, the mundane task that would unravel my entire world. The receipt was from a florist, 2 dozen red roses, purchased 3 days earlier. I stared at it, trying to remember if he had brought me flowers recently, already knowing the answer. He hadn't brought me flowers in over a year, not since our 10th anniversary, when he had grabbed a sad bouquet from the grocery store on his way home from work. My name is Petra Morrison. I am 38 years old, a black woman working as an emergency room nurse at the county hospital. I have been married to Lionel Morrison for 12 years, together for 14. We have an 8-year-old son named Justice and a mortgage on a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb. Until I found that receipt, I thought I knew my life. I thought I knew my husband. But as I stood there in the laundry room with that receipt in my hand, the paper soft from being washed and dried, the numbers still legible despite the fading, I felt the first crack appear in the foundation of everything I believed. Before the story continues, please leave us a comment telling us which state or city you are watching from. Do not forget to like and subscribe so this channel can grow and bring you more exciting stories. Lionel was a contractor, running his own small construction business. He left early most mornings, often before Justice and I were awake, and came home late, usually after dinner, smelling of sawdust and sweat. He was always tired, always stressed about the next job, the next payment, the overhead costs that seemed to multiply faster than the income. I had been sympathetic, understanding, the supportive wife who didn't complain when he missed family dinners or fell asleep on the couch instead of coming to bed with me. Now I wondered what else I had been understanding about, what else I had missed while being too busy, too trusting, too naive. I put the receipt in my wallet and finished the laundry. When Lionel came home that night, I watched him carefully as he kissed me on the cheek and asked what was for dinner. He looked the same as always. Tired lines around his dark eyes, his beard starting to gray at the edges, his broad shoulders slightly slumped from the weight of the day. He looked like my husband, but the receipt in my wallet said he might be someone else's as well. "How was your day?" I asked, stirring the pasta on the stove. "Long. We're working on that renovation over on Maple Street. The client keeps changing her mind about the kitchen cabinets. 3rd time this week." "That must be frustrating." "You have no idea." He grabbed a beer from the refrigerator and collapsed onto a kitchen chair. "How about you? Busy at the hospital?" "The usual. MVA came in around 2, kept us occupied most of the afternoon." We had this conversation almost every night. The comfortable script of a long marriage, familiar and safe. Except now it felt hollow, like we were actors reading lines without understanding the plot. Justice ran in from the living room where he had been playing video games. "Dad, can you help me with my science project?" "After dinner, buddy. Dad's beat." I watched Justice's face fall, the familiar disappointment of a child whose father was always too tired, too busy, too absent. I had made excuses for Lionel, explained that Daddy worked very hard to give us a nice life, but now those excuses tasted bitter in my mouth. That night, after Justice was in bed, I tried to initiate intimacy with Lionel. It had been weeks, maybe a month since we had made love. He was always too tired, falling asleep within minutes of his head hitting the pillow. But that night I needed to know if he would respond, if he still wanted me, if the physical connection we once had was still alive. He kissed me back, his hands moving over my body with practiced familiarity. But there was something perfunctory about it, something distant, like he was going through motions rather than feeling genuine desire. We made love quickly, efficiently, and when it was over, he rolled away and was asleep within minutes. I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, and knew that something was fundamentally wrong. Over the next week, I started paying attention. Really paying attention, the way I had been trained to observe patients in the ER, looking for the small signs that indicated bigger problems. I noticed that Lionel showered before coming home most nights, when he used to come home dirty and shower after dinner. I noticed that he was suddenly meticulous about keeping his phone with him at all times, even taking it to the bathroom. I noticed that he had started working late on Thursdays specifically, a pattern that hadn't existed before. And I noticed the way he looked at me sometimes, with something that might have been guilt or might have been pity. The second piece of evidence came 2 weeks after the receipt. I was using Lionel's laptop to look up a recipe because my phone had died, and when I opened the browser, his email was still logged in. I shouldn't have looked. I knew I shouldn't have. But the temptation was too strong, the need to know overwhelming the ethics of privacy. There were no smoking gun emails, no love letters or explicit messages. But there were calendar entries that caught my eye. Maple Street renovation appeared multiple times a week, always in the late afternoon or early evening. But when I checked the dates against when he had actually come home, there were discrepancies. Days when the calendar said he was at Maple Street until 6, but he didn't get home until 9. 3-hour gaps that weren't accounted for. I looked up the Maple Street address. It was only 20 minutes from our house, in a nicer neighborhood than ours, where the houses had big yards and 2-car garages. I used Google Street View to look at the property. It was a beautiful craftsman-style home, well-maintained, with a tidy garden and a BMW in the driveway. The kind of house Lionel and I had always said we would upgrade to someday, when the business was more stable, when we had saved enough. The kind of house that would belong to someone with money, someone who could afford 24 red roses on a whim. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark kitchen, my hands shaking. I didn't have proof yet. Not real proof, but I had enough to know that I needed to find out the truth, one way or another. The opportunity came the following Thursday. Lionel mentioned at breakfast that he would be working late again, finishing up some details on the Maple Street project. I nodded, poured his coffee, kissed him goodbye, and started planning. I called in sick to work, something I rarely did. I dropped Justice at school as usual, but instead of going to the hospital, I went home and changed. I put on dark jeans and a black jacket, pulled my hair back into a ponytail, and felt ridiculous, like I was dressing for a spy movie. But I didn't know what else to do. I had never followed anyone before. I had never needed to. I parked my car 2 blocks from Lionel's workshop, the small industrial unit he rented to store his tools and equipment. I waited. At 3:30, his truck pulled out, the white Ford with Morrison Construction painted on the side. I followed at a distance, my heart hammering in my chest, terrified he would spot me, and equally terrified of what I would find if he didn't. He drove toward Maple Street just like his calendar said. I felt a moment of relief, thinking maybe I was wrong, maybe I was being paranoid. But then, 2 blocks before the Maple Street address, he turned down a side street and pulled into a driveway I didn't recognize. I drove past slowly, trying to see without being obvious. The house was a 2-story colonial, painted pale yellow with white trim, beautiful and expensive looking. Not the house from his calendar, a different house entirely. I parked around the corner and walked back, staying on the opposite side of the street, my hood up, even though it wasn't cold. I watched as Lionel got out of his truck, looked around quickly, then walked to the front door. He didn't knock. He pulled out a key and let himself in. He had a key. To someone else's house. A house he had never mentioned to me. I stood there on the sidewalk, frozen, my mind racing through possibilities. Maybe it was a client's house. Maybe he was doing work inside and they had given him a key for access. Maybe there was a perfectly innocent explanation, but he had looked around before going in. He had checked to make sure no one was watching. That wasn't the behavior of someone with nothing to hide. I needed to get closer. I needed to see inside, to know what was happening in that house. I crossed the street, my legs feeling disconnected from my body, operating on autopilot while my brain screamed at me to turn around, to go home, to preserve the illusion of my marriage for just a little bit longer. The house had large windows at the front, but the curtains were drawn. I walked up the driveway, trying to look casual, like I belonged there. Lionel's truck was parked in the driveway, bold as anything, not hidden or disguised. Either he was incredibly arrogant, or he truly believed no one would question his presence here. I moved to the side of the house where there was a gate leading to the backyard. It was unlocked. I pushed it open slowly, wincing at the slight creak, and slipped into the back garden. It was beautifully landscaped, with a patio and outdoor furniture, a garden that someone cared for and maintained. The back of the house had sliding glass doors, leading to what looked like a kitchen and family room. The curtains here were partially open. I crouched behind a large planter and peered inside. What I saw made my blood run cold. Lionel was in the kitchen, and he wasn't alone. There was a woman with him. She was white, blonde, probably in her mid-30s, wearing yoga pants and a fitted top. She was laughing at something he said, her hand on his arm, familiar and comfortable. And then, as I watched in frozen horror, a little girl ran into the room. She looked about 5 or 6 years old, with blonde curls and a bright smile. She ran straight to Lionel, calling out, "Daddy! Daddy!" She called him Daddy. Lionel scooped her up, spinning her around, his face lit up with joy and love in a way I hadn't seen in years. He kissed her cheek, set her down, and she ran to the woman, who picked her up and settled her on her hip. The three of them stood there in that beautiful kitchen, looking for all the world like a family. A complete, happy family. And I understood with horrible, crystal clarity what I was seeing. My husband had another family, not a mistress, not an affair in the traditional sense, a whole other life, another wife, another child, another home. He was living 2 lives simultaneously, and I had been too blind, too trusting, too stupid to see it. I don't know how long I crouched there behind that planter, watching them move around the kitchen, watching the woman cook dinner while Lionel helped, the little girl coloring at the table. It was a scene of domestic tranquility, the same kind of scene that probably played out in my house when Lionel was actually there. Except this woman got him more often. This woman got the version of him that came home before dark, that helped with dinner, that played with his daughter, instead of being too tired. This woman got the husband I thought I had. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and started taking photos. The truck in the driveway, the house number, Lionel visible through the window. Evidence. I needed evidence because no one would believe this without proof. I barely believed it, and I was watching it happen. I was so focused on documenting everything that I didn't hear the footsteps behind me until it was too late. "Can I help you?" I spun around. A neighbor, an elderly white man walking a small dog, was staring at me with suspicion and concern. I was crouched in someone's backyard, wearing dark clothes, taking photos through their window. I looked exactly like what I was, someone who didn't belong there. I was just... My mind went blank. I couldn't think of a single plausible explanation. The man's eyes narrowed. "I'm calling the police." "No, please, I can explain." But I couldn't explain. Not to this stranger. And I definitely couldn't explain before the police showed up and made this situation 1,000 times worse. I ran. I pushed past the man, ignoring his shouts, and ran back through the gate and down the street to my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I drove away, checking my rearview mirror constantly, terrified I would see police lights or, worse, Lionel's truck following me. I made it 3 blocks before I had to pull over. I leaned against the steering wheel and sobbed, huge, gasping sobs that came from somewhere deep in my chest. My husband had another family, another wife, another child. How was that even possible? How do you maintain 2 separate lives, 2 separate homes, 2 separate families without either one finding out? The logistics of it started to click into place. The early mornings and late nights, the constant exhaustion, the stress about money that never seemed to get better no matter how many jobs he took on. He was supporting 2 households, 2 families. Everything he earned was being split between 2 lives. And the roses. Those roses hadn't been for his mistress. They had been for his other wife. Maybe for an anniversary, or a birthday, or just because. The same romantic gestures he used to make for me, now given to someone else. I drove home in a daze. I picked up Justice from school, made him a snack, helped him with his homework, all while functioning on autopilot. My body performed the familiar routines while my mind was screaming, trapped in an endless loop of those images. Lionel laughing in that kitchen, the little girl calling him Daddy. the blonde woman touching his arm with casual intimacy. When Lionel came home at 8:30 that night, I was sitting in the dark living room, waiting for him. He walked in, saw me, and frowned. "Why are you sitting in the dark? Is Justice asleep?" "Who is she?" He froze. In the dim light from the hallway, I saw his face go pale. "Who is who?" "The woman on Maple Street. Or actually, not on Maple Street, on Birchwood Lane. The woman with the blonde hair and the little girl who calls you daddy." The silence that followed was deafening. He didn't ask how I knew. He didn't try to deny it. He just stood there, and I watched the mask slip, watched the careful compartmentalization of his double life crack and shatter. "Petra, I can explain." "Explain? You're going to explain how you have a whole other family? How you have another child I didn't know about? Please, Lionel, I'm dying to hear this explanation." He sat down heavily on the couch, his head in his hands. "It's complicated." "I'm sure it is. Bigamy usually is. She and I aren't married. Not legally." "Oh well, that makes it so much better. You're only legally married to me. You just have a common law wife and secret child on the side. That's so much more acceptable." "Don't be sarcastic, this is serious." I stood up, rage flooding through me so intensely I felt like I might burst into flames. "Don't be sarcastic. You have been lying to me for years. You have a whole other family that you've kept hidden. You have a daughter, Lionel, a daughter that your son doesn't know exists. And you're telling me not to be sarcastic? How did you find out?" "I followed you. After finding the receipt for flowers you didn't give me, after noticing all the little signs I had been too stupid to see. I followed you and I saw everything." He looked up at me, and for the first time I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not fear of losing me. Fear of being caught, of his carefully constructed lies falling apart. "How long?" I demanded. "How long has this been going on?" 7 years. The number hit me like a physical blow. 7 years. Justice was 8. That meant Lionel had started this other relationship when our son was barely a toddler. While I was exhausted from new motherhood, from sleepless nights and endless diapers, he had been starting a whole other family. "Who is she?" "Her name is Cassidy. We met at a job site. She owned the house I was renovating. We started talking, and it happened. It just happened. You just accidentally fell into bed with another woman and accidentally got her pregnant and accidentally maintained a relationship with her for 7 years. All by accident." "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like? Help me understand how my husband of 12 years has been living a double life for more than half of our marriage." He was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I love you both." I laughed, a harsh sound that hurt my throat. "You love us both. How generous of you." "I know it sounds insane, but it's true. I love you, Petra. I love our life together, our son. But I also love her. I love Maren, our daughter. I couldn't choose. I couldn't give either of you up. So you just decided to have both of us? Without giving either of us a choice? Without letting us decide if we wanted to be in this kind of relationship? You wouldn't have understood." "You're damn right I wouldn't have understood, because it's insane, because you can't love two people equally while lying to both of them constantly." "I wasn't lying to her. She knows about you." The words dropped into the conversation like stones into still water, sending ripples of shock through my entire body. "What?" "Cassidy knows about you, about our marriage. She's always known." I couldn't breathe. The woman I had seen through that window, the blonde with the easy smile and the casual intimacy, she had known about me the whole time. She had known that the man she was building a life with was married to someone else. She had known, and she hadn't cared. She's okay with this? With being the other woman? She's not the other woman. We're all family, just in an unconventional way. Does she know you're legally married to me? Does she know that you made vows to me in front of God and everyone we know? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. "She thinks you're divorced," I said, the realization dawning. "She thinks you left me and married her, doesn't she?" "It's complicated." Stop saying that. Nothing about this is complicated. It's simple. You're a liar and a cheat who's been manipulating two women for 7 years. I never meant to hurt anyone. But you did. You hurt me. You've been hurting me for 7 years. I just didn't know it. And you've been hurting her too, whether she realizes it or not. And your children, both of them, they're going to be devastated when this all comes out. It doesn't have to come out. We can figure this out. Make it work. Make it work? You think there's a version of this where I'm okay sharing my husband with another woman? Where I'm fine with my son having a secret half-sister? What reality are you living in? People do it. Polyamory is a thing. We could all sit down and talk, establish boundaries, make it work for everyone. Polyamory requires consent, Lionel. It requires honesty. You don't get to have multiple partners without them knowing about each other. That's not polyamory, that's just cheating on multiple people. He stood up, reaching for me, but I stepped back. I couldn't let him touch me. If he touched me, I might break, and I needed to stay strong right now. Petra, please, I know I messed up. I know I should have told you, but I'm telling you now. We can work through this. For justice's sake, we have to try. Don't you dare use our son as a reason to stay. You didn't think about him when you were creating a whole other family. I thought about him every day. I thought about both my kids every day. I wanted them to have a father who was present and loving. So you split yourself in half? You gave each family part of you instead of being whole for either of us? I did the best I could. Your best was lying for 7 years? Your best was making me feel crazy for noticing you were distant? Your best was having another child without telling your wife? What do you want me to say? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't give me back the 7 years I spent thinking I had a faithful husband. Sorry doesn't explain to our son why he has a sister he didn't know about. So, what do you want to do? I want a divorce. The words came out clear and certain. As soon as I said them, I knew they were true. There was no salvaging this. No amount of counseling or apologies or promises could rebuild trust that had been so fundamentally shattered. Petra, don't make any rash decisions. Let's take some time. Think about this. You've had 7 years to think about this. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine. I walked past him to the bedroom, pulled a suitcase from the closet, and started packing his clothes. He followed me, trying to stop me, but I ignored him. I filled the suitcase with everything I could fit, then dragged it to the front door. You need to leave, tonight. I don't want you here when Justice wakes up. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know, Lionel. Maybe go to your other house, to your other family. You've been so good at juggling both of us. I'm sure you'll figure it out. I can't just show up there at 9 at night with a suitcase. Cassidy will ask questions. Then I guess you'll finally have to tell her the truth, that you're still married, that you've been lying to her too. Welcome to consequences. He stood there with his suitcase at his feet, looking lost and pathetic. Part of me, a very small part that still remembered loving this man, wanted to comfort him. But the larger part, the part that was furious and betrayed and done with his lies, wanted him gone. I'll come by tomorrow to talk to Justice, he said finally. Fine, but I'm telling him the truth, about all of it. He's 8. He doesn't need to know all the details. He needs to know he has a sister. He needs to know why his father isn't living here anymore. I won't lie to protect you. Lionel picked up his suitcase and walked to the door. He turned back one more time. I really do love you. I know you don't believe me, but I do. If that's what your love looks like, I don't want it. He left. I locked the door behind him and leaned against it, my legs finally giving out. I slid down to the floor and sat there in the entryway of my house, the house I had thought was my home, but was apparently just one of 2 homes my husband maintained. I needed to call someone. My mother, maybe, or my best friend Kendra. But the thought of saying the words out loud, of making this real by telling another person, was too much. Instead, I sat there until I heard Justice's door open, heard his small footsteps coming down the stairs. Mommy, why are you on the floor? I looked up at my beautiful son, at his concerned face and sleep-tousled hair, and felt my heart break all over again. How was I going to tell him? How was I going to explain that his father had been living a lie? "Come here, baby," I said, pulling him into my lap even though he was getting too big for it. "Mommy needs to talk to you about something important." The next few days were a blur of difficult conversations and painful revelations. I told Justice an age-appropriate version of the truth, that Daddy had another family, that he had made some bad choices, and that he wouldn't be living with us anymore. Justice cried and asked if it was his fault, and I held him and promised him over and over that none of this was his fault. I called Kendra, and she came over immediately with wine and tissues. She listened to the whole story without interruption, her expression growing darker with each detail. "I'm going to kill him," she said when I finished. "Actually kill him. Get in line." "Petra, this is insane. Like, actually insane. I've heard of men having affairs, but a whole other family? For 7 years? How is that even possible? I keep asking myself the same thing. The logistics alone, it's mind-boggling." "And this other woman knows about you?" "Apparently, but he told her we were divorced." "So he lied to her too." "Yeah, I almost feel sorry for her. Almost." "Are you going to tell her? That you're still married?" I had been thinking about that. Part of me wanted to drive back to that house and confront Cassidy, to see her face when she realized she was the mistress, not the wife. But another part of me just wanted to be done with all of it, to extricate myself from this mess as cleanly as possible. I don't know. Maybe. First, I need to see a lawyer. Kendra recommended her cousin, an attorney named Rochelle, who specialized in family law. I met with her the next day, bringing all the evidence I had. The photos from the house, the receipt for the flowers, screenshots of Lionel's calendar with the discrepancies. Rochelle listened to everything, taking notes, her expression professional but sympathetic. "This is one of the more unusual cases I've seen," she said when I finished. "But the legal aspects are actually fairly straightforward. You have grounds for divorce based on adultery. The tricky part will be figuring out his actual finances. If he's been supporting 2 households, we need to know exactly how much he's been spending and where the money's been going. He's been stressed about money for years. I thought it was just the business struggling. It might be. Or it might be that he's been spreading himself too thin financially. We'll need to subpoena his bank records, credit card statements, everything. If he's been using marital assets to support his other family, you may have a claim for reimbursement." "What about the other woman? Can she make any claims on his assets?" "Not if they're not legally married. Common law marriage isn't recognized in this state. Legally, you're his only wife." That should have felt like a victory, but it just felt hollow. Being the legal wife didn't make the betrayal hurt any less. Over the next week, I learned more about my husband's double life than I ever wanted to know. Rochelle's investigation revealed that Lionel had been renting the house on Birchwood Lane, paying cash every month. He had 2 cell phones, one for each family, carefully keeping them separate. He had been working himself to exhaustion, taking on extra jobs to afford both households, which explained the constant stress and fatigue. And he had been spending significant amounts on Cassidy and Marin, the daughter I hadn't known existed. Dance classes, private school tuition, family vacations I had never been invited on. While I was clipping coupons and shopping at discount stores to help make ends meet, he was living a second life of relative luxury with his other family. The anger I felt was volcanic. It wasn't just about the infidelity anymore. It was about the financial manipulation, the years of lying, the way he had made me feel guilty for spending money on myself while he was funding an entire second life. A week after I kicked him out, Lionel called and asked to meet. He wanted to talk about how to move forward, how to minimize damage to everyone involved. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop, neutral territory where I wouldn't be tempted to throw something at him. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, rumpled clothes, the weight of maintaining his lies finally showing on his face. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. "Make it quick. I have to pick up Justice in an hour." "How is he?" "How do you think? His father abandoned him for a secret family. He's devastated." Lionel flinched. "I didn't abandon him. I'm still his father." "A father who's been dividing his time between 2 families without either of them knowing. That's not being a present father, Lionel. That's being a part-time dad to both your kids." I know I messed up. I'm trying to figure out how to make this right. You can't make it right. The best you can do is try not to make it worse. He took a breath. I told Cassidy. About you, about still being married. How did that go? About as well as you'd expect. She's furious. She feels betrayed. She's threatening to keep me from seeing Maren. So now you know how it feels, to have everything you thought was real turn out to be a lie. It wasn't all a lie. My feelings for both of you were real. Stop saying that. You don't get to claim love as a defense when you've been lying for 7 years. What do you want from me, Petra? What can I do to make this better? I want a divorce. I want fair division of assets, taking into account the money you spent on your other family. I want joint custody of justice with clear boundaries. And I want you to leave me alone beyond the absolute minimum required for co-parenting. That's it? You don't want to try to work through this? I stared at him in disbelief. Work through what? Work through you having an entire secret family? Work through 7 years of lies? Lionel, there is no working through this. Our marriage is over. It's been over for a long time, I just didn't know it. What about Cassidy and Maren? How do we handle introducing the kids? That's not my problem. You created this mess. You figure out how to explain to your children that they have a secret sibling. I'm just worried about justice. They're half siblings. They should know each other. Maybe eventually, but not now. Justice is barely processing that his father is moving out. He doesn't need the added trauma of meeting a secret sister. She's not a secret anymore. No, now she's just evidence of your betrayal. Much better. We sat in silence for a moment. Finally, Lionel spoke again, his voice small. Do you hate me? I thought about it. Did I hate him? I wanted to. Hate would be cleaner, simpler than the complicated mess of emotions I actually felt. Rage, yes. Betrayal, absolutely. But also grief for what I thought we had, and a strange pity for the man who had worked himself to exhaustion, trying to maintain 2 lives. I don't hate you, I said finally. I hate what you did. I hate that you lied to me for 7 years. I hate that you made me doubt myself when I noticed things were off. I hate that you involved our son in your deception, making him a pawn in your double life. But I don't hate you. Hating you would require caring about you, and I'm trying very hard not to do that anymore. He looked like I had slapped him. Maybe the truth hurt more than hatred. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce proceedings, I said, standing up. Communicate with her, not with me. The only time I want to hear from you directly is about justice. Petra, wait. But I was already walking away. I had spent enough time on Lionel Morrison and his lies. It was time to start rebuilding a life for myself and my son. The divorce process was ugly. Lionel fought me on almost everything, claiming he couldn't afford the settlement I was asking for because he had financial obligations to Cassidy and Maren. Rochelle was ruthless, pointing out that those obligations were voluntary and illegal, as he had been using marital assets to fund an affair. The judge agreed, and Lionel was ordered to reimburse the marital estate for money spent on his other family. It turned out to be a substantial amount. Over the 7 years, he had spent nearly $200,000 on rent, utilities, and personal expenses for Cassidy and Maren, money that should have gone into our savings, into Justice's college fund, into the home repairs we had been putting off because we couldn't afford them. The reimbursement, plus my half of our actual marital assets, meant I walked away from the marriage in better financial shape than I had been in years. It was small comfort compared to the emotional devastation, but at least I wouldn't be struggling to support Justice on my nurse's salary alone. 6 months after I discovered Lionel's secret, the divorce was finalized. I threw a small party with Kendra and a few other friends, burning symbolic items from my marriage in a fire pit in my backyard. My wedding photos, the love letters Lionel had written me when we were dating, the anniversary cards where he had written about how lucky he was to have me. All lies, all ashes now. Justice was doing better. He was in therapy, working through his feelings about his father's betrayal. Lionel had visitation every other weekend, and while it was awkward, they were rebuilding their relationship slowly. One unexpected development was that Justice had asked to meet his half-sister. After talking to his therapist, we decided to arrange a supervised meeting at a neutral location. I met Cassidy for the first time in a park playground, both of us awkward and uncertain. She was prettier in person than I had expected, though she looked tired and worn down. She kept her distance, clearly uncomfortable. "Thank you for agreeing to this," she said stiffly. "Maren has been asking about Justice since she found out about him." "Justice wanted to meet her too. I think it's good for them to know each other, even though the circumstances are terrible." She looked at me directly for the first time. "I didn't know about you still being married. He told me you were divorced years ago." "I know. He lied to both of us. I feel like an idiot. Join the club." We watched as Justice and Maren met for the first time, two kids who shared a father but lived in different worlds. They were shy at first, but within minutes they were running around the playground together, laughing. Children were resilient in ways adults could never be. "How are you doing?" Cassidy asked. "Financially, I mean. I heard about the settlement." "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. The money he spent on you and Maren is being repaid from his business assets. It's only fair." She winced. "I never asked him to spend that much on us. I have my own job. I could have contributed more." "But you didn't. You let him support you while he was still married to me." "That was a choice. A choice based on lies. He told me he was divorced, that you had taken everything in the settlement, that he was barely scraping by." "And you believed him?" "Why wouldn't I? I didn't have any reason to think he was lying." I wanted to argue, to point out all the red flags she must have missed, but looking at her tired face, I realized she was just another victim of Lionel's deception. She had trusted him, just like I had, and he had manipulated her just as thoroughly as he had manipulated me. "What are you going to do now?" I asked. "I'm suing him for child support. My lawyer says, even though we weren't married, he has an obligation to Maren. The courts will determine a fair amount based on his income." "Good. He needs to take responsibility for all his children, not just the one he felt like being with on any given day." "Are you angry? At me?" I thought about it. Was I angry at her? She had been sleeping with my husband for 7 years. She had borne his child, built a life with him, taken money that rightfully belonged to my family. But she had done it believing he was free, believing he had chosen her legitimately. "I was angry," I said finally. "I'm still angry, but mostly at him, not at you. You didn't know what you were participating in. I didn't know what I was participating in. We were both his victims." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry. For whatever that's worth, I'm sorry." "Me too." We stood together in uncomfortable silence, two women connected by the lies of one man, watching our children play in the autumn sunshine. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't friendship, but it was understanding, a shared acknowledgement of the damage that had been done to all of us. A year after I discovered Lionel's secret family, I was in a completely different place. The house was mine, bought out with the settlement money. I had gotten promoted to a senior position at the hospital. Justice was thriving, adjusting to his new normal of 2 households and a sister he saw once a month. And I was dating. Not seriously, not yet. But I was open to the possibility of love again, even though trust would be harder to come by. I had learned to pay attention to the small signs, the inconsistencies, the feeling in my gut when something wasn't right. I would never be as trusting as I had been before, but I would also never be as blind. One evening, I was folding laundry, the same task that had started this whole journey, when I found a receipt in Justice's jacket pocket. It was from a bookstore, for a graphic novel he had been wanting. Lionel had bought it for him during their last visit. I smiled, tucked the receipt in the trash, and kept folding. Some receipts were just receipts, but I would always check. I would always pay attention. And I would never again ignore the evidence right in front of me, because I had learned the hardest lesson of all, that the person sleeping next to you, the person you trust with your life and your heart, can be a stranger wearing a familiar face. That love without honesty is just a beautiful lie. And that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is follow the truth wherever it leads, even when it takes you to a house you didn't know existed, to a life your partner built in the shadows, to the ending of everything you thought was real. I followed my husband and discovered his secret. But in doing so, I also discovered my own strength, my own resilience, my own capacity to survive betrayal and build something new from the ashes of broken promises. And that, in the end, was the most important discovery of all. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. Thank you so much for your sweet support. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.